Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be with you and thank you for joining us for this conversation that's on many of our minds and it's really important. It's about building diverse teams and nurturing talent to foster innovation in our organizations. I'm Janine Banks. I'm the General Manager of AWS Insights and Enterprise Tools. My team helps customers manage their compliance, integration, and cost of their cloud applications on AWS. And I'm so pleased to be joined by a couple of my friends today and colleagues. Whitney Bauk, she's the Chief Operating Officer at HelloSign, and Celia Karam, the Chief Audit Officer at CapitalOne. I would love for Whitney and Celia to jump in and introduce themselves. Let's start with you, Whitney.
Great. Thanks for having us, Janine. This is going to be really fun. And as Janine said, I'm the COO of HelloSign, which is an electronic signature company. We provide ability for companies to digitize all of the workflows that are around contracts, agreements, quotes, price proposals, anything that requires a legally binding signature, and making that as easy as possible and as speedy as possible. So that's what we do. And I should admit, we're a part of Dropbox. We got acquired about a year and a half ago now. And so much of what I get to comment on today is both the reflection of the HelloSign team, but also the larger Dropbox team. And I'm really excited to be here and have the conversation. Thanks.
Whitney, thanks so much. And Janine, thanks for having us both here. Lovely to be with you guys. As Janine said, I'm the Chief Audit Officer for CapitalOne, which, if you're wondering what on earth audit does, essentially for all of the innovation that CapitalOne is doing for our consumers, the audit team is part of ensuring that we do that in a risk-managed way so that everything we deliver for our customers is safe and reliable, and we can keep innovating at the incredible pace that we're seeking to go. A little bit about me, just a word or two. Before I became an auditor, I actually have been running businesses over time at CapitalOne. So I've run our small business bank, and then I've also spent time in our consumer bank business. So think checking and savings and how we use mobile to manage our money today. And then also I have a bit of a history in underwriting and led big chunks of our credit business. So you name it, I've had a chance to tackle it within financial services. And I'm so excited to share some thoughts with you all today on talent and diversity in the workplace. I think it's such an important topic.
We know that the demand for talent is just enormous across all disciplines, especially in the tech world. And with our organizations pursuing different strategies, I'm really curious what you all have found that works or have experimented with in recruiting and how you continue to nurture and retain talent. And with tech careers in particular, it's not just about technical acumen, as we know, right? It's also the soft skills and a range of other experiences that are important to helping us innovate and attracting customers. So how about we start with you, Whitney? How are you kind of pursuing strategies in your organization on this subject?
I think it has to be a very deliberate effort that is recognized and supported from the top. And I think if you don't have that as the setup, then having real efforts around bringing diverse employees into the company is actually probably not likely to be all that successful. So for us, we have very well published goals on what we want to have, both from a diversity standpoint and an underrepresented minority standpoint as employees. We have programs, we have an appointed diversity officer who really helps to kind of put those kinds of programs in place. So I think that's been very successful for us. The second thing I think of is that we ensure that we're trying to recruit from a wide range of places, and especially those that support diverse candidates. And so if we're, for example, looking to really up-level the number of female engineers we have, then we might recruit from places like Grace Hopper or things along those lines where we know that there's a predominance of women engineers that we can recruit and hopefully bring into the family. So I think those two things have really helped. And I think the third thing is that we talk about it a lot as a company. We've made sure that it's a regular topic of conversation in our company-wide meetings. We've made sure that the goals that we're trying to hit around the numbers of folks that we bring in that fit these criteria are well known by everyone. And we've also worked, kind of certain I guess exposing the values and the fact that we really embrace diversity as a company. We've made that quite public as part of our recruiting pages, as part of our website when we describe the company and so forth. And so I think all those things have kind of helped contribute to a recognized, invested in, and embraced set of efforts that really help to make our company much more diverse.
That's really interesting. And it also makes me think about like how important it is to have data to inform those decisions. What about you, Celia?
I think it's a fantastic question. And so many of the elements that Whitney called on are best practices that I see at Capital One and at several places across the industry. There are really two big things that I would maybe add to the conversation. One is that when we think about talent strategy, diversity isn't sort of an add-on, right? Sort of an extra thing we have to do in the strategy. In order for these efforts to work, it has to be part and parcel of every aspect of our talent strategy. And so when we think about things like creating, a compelling experience for associates, and the work that we do with our business resource groups, where we have a group that I lead, for example, which is our Voices Business Resource Group, which focuses on Black associates, or other kinds of organizations within the company that are really thinking about programming or training or support and networking. All of those aspects of the associate experience have to have diversity within their core if they're going to deliver an experience that we can then talk to recruits about and they would get excited to join. Similarly, when I think about sort of other aspects of our talent strategy, Janine, you touched on data. Capital One is an incredibly data-driven company. In every part of our business decision-making, data is at the core. And this is no different, right? As we understand what are the experiences like of our associates kind of told through our data, both qualitative and quantitative, we can then use that to help develop strategies and programmings that meet people where they are and deliver the kinds of experiences that we need. And that same focus on data kind of carries through into our recruiting as we think about how do we broaden our funnel and really seek different populations and different networks where we can tap into recruits. As you said, the marketplace is incredibly competitive, and sometimes just knowing where to look to find the incredible talent that's out there is really key, and data plays a big role in us thinking about that.
I have a question for you too, Celia. You have a really interesting career journey. You mentioned in our introductions that you had been in pretty much every job there was to have. I'm curious if you can comment a little bit on how that might have contributed to your personal growth, to your desire to innovate, just kind of like what is having that background of really diversified experiences and roles done for you?
Whitney, it's a great question. And I will admit that my path can seem a little bit windy and maybe untraditional. The roles in title have a lot of differences, but underneath them, they have quite a few things in common. One is that each of them really represented a big, hairy challenge, a need to figure out how to reinvent what we were doing in the space. I think that idea of we are here doing one thing today, and if we look at where the future is going, that's probably not the strategy that's going to win in the future. And so how do you recast and rewrite what we need to be as a team from a strategic perspective, but then how do you engage groups of people to then sort of turn the ship and start heading in the direction of that new strategy, building new products for customers, solving a different set of customer needs or evolving needs, also building new skills that they need to kind of operate in that business model. That kind of reinvention, it turns out is super fun. I tend to geek out on those kinds of hard problems. They're both kind of intellectually hard, but also emotionally, and sort of how do you connect with with associates to build the fellowship behind that kind of strategy change. And so I really find them to be pretty exciting, and I've had a chance to do that at several different turns in my career. It's interesting, while the skills that I've built at Transformation definitely opened up doors and are, a big part of how I think I've been successful over time is that sort of proven result to be able to turn businesses around and reinvent them. I didn't do all of that by myself. I had mentors along the way. I had sponsors along the way who were also part of helping me make those transitions into the next kind of interesting big growth opportunity. And as I reflect back on that, I can really see the ways in which those mentors and sponsors really helped open doors for me. And that's something I focus a lot on as well as I think about coaching the people who are coming behind me, and now being a mentor and a sponsor for others. And so as I think about, the notion of a culture of inclusion, which everyone talks about as being really foundational to having success from a diversity perspective and in terms of retaining the talent that we want, it's so much easier to say than it is to do, to actually create a space in which associates feel included. And so I wanted to hear a little bit from you all in terms of what you've tried. And Whitney, I think I'll start with you first. I'd love to hear a little bit about whether it's kind of programming or more informal things that you all are doing to try to create a culture of inclusion.
It's really interesting, Celia. Great question. I feel like you're right. It is easier to say than do. And it takes concerted effort and investment to make these things work. And I think inclusion is not just about embracing diversity, but it is about making everyone feel included, regardless of from what angle. And that it could be extrovert versus introvert. Many people are shy of talking very openly in group settings, and we have to make sure they feel that they have a voice. Just like we need to take consideration for underrepresented minorities or, women in engineering, which, as you point out, is another kind of rare area that we just don't see enough women engineers today. So some of the things that we've done, first of all, I have to recognize that for HelloSign, we had, by accident or on purpose, I'm not sure because I wasn't there at the time, but we had a very, very diverse culture from the outset. And interestingly, I have found that diversity breeds diversity. That, if you have a very varied makeup of employees, they have their own connections and cultures and interest groups and ways of bringing other people into the organization. And naturally, we all want to refer other people to work with us in our organization. So if you start with a diverse group, you end up kind of building even more diversity that way. And so I can't say enough good things about start early. The earlier, the better.
And Janine, would love to hear some of your thoughts as well in terms of what AWS is trying on the inclusive culture front.
Yeah, I'm just loving this conversation, and it just makes me think about just the multiple levels of effort that it's so important to have, right? There's sort of that broader kind of macro impact. For example, the Computing Technology Industry Association, they did a study that they actually were able to show quantifiably the impact of inclusion and diversity on the company's metrics, revenue, for example. And they came up with this simple formula that they said, if you increase your representative diversity by 1 percentage point in your organization, that translates and can translate to 3 percentage points of revenue, right? And so when I just think about Amazon and as a company and the revenue that we reported for 2018, for example, or 2019, the results, and if you assume 3%, we increase 1% diversity, 3% revenue, that's right there, billions of dollars, right? And so for our employees who are compensated with an important mix of equity in their total compensation, that is a meaningful number, because then we can say, if we're all working toward improving and growing diversity and inclusion in the organization, then that translates to a very tangible outcome for the organization as a whole at that macro level. But then it also translates to me as an employee in terms of the equity and shared ownership I have in the company. The second observation I would have is then there's that next level in terms of leaders, and all leaders, different roles, different levels, but what we want to see with leaders who are promoting and advocating for their diverse talent in the organization. And so, for example, with promotions and the promotion process, we have a really rigorous process around promotions. And it's really about diving deep into that individual's impact, both for customers in the organization, as well as how they show up, the leadership principles that we have as an organization, whether it's diving deep or invent and simplify, earn trust. How does that employee show up, that leader show up on those leadership principles? And so we go through this process, and we have a panel of, to help calibrate other leaders who can give feedback on that candidate. But what's interesting is often in the discussion that we have, once the material is brought forward to discuss an individual's promotion, we now have a really meaningful discussion about how do they hire and develop the best. And that's not even just for people managers. It's also for individual contributors who are leaders in the organization. How are they hiring and developing the best in terms of mentoring others, influencing other parts of the organization and other teams, and interacting with those teams, driving best practices, improving company-wide or team-wide processes. So there are a number of ways that they can help develop the organization, and then also specific metrics around interviewing talent, what percentage of loops that we do, interviewing loops, have diverse candidates, or other metrics like that. So we have a tangible way to say, when we're looking at leaders and rewarding leaders in terms of promotions or compensation decisions, we can tangibly kind of tie that back to how they're driving a more inclusive culture and diverse environment for the company. And then I would say the third aspect of that is, what are some of the specific outlets or channels that we put in place for teams and for the engagement? You mentioned, Celia, employee resource groups. There's also even a lot of, especially in the remote and virtual working environment, a lot of even more informal ways of interacting and creating safe spaces for different individuals to come together, get support, hear what's happening in other parts of the organization, and kind of build those bridges. For example, we have adopted Slack in our teams, and so we've been rolling that out across different teams, and you have these different channels for messaging, and you find different channels for different interest groups. And so that's also been, I think, really powerful to kind of connect people and help navigate such a large organization. If I'm an individual who haven't been exposed to certain experiences before, and I want to explore engineering, or I want to explore marketing, I could even, jump into some of these different interest groups, meet new people, form new relationships, and learn new things. So I think that it's a really multi-layered, approach that is going to be most impactful in driving results in this area.
I think those are a fantastic set of examples. And I love your point, Janine, about it being multi-layered, because I agree with you. It's no single element. It's really all the pieces of the strategy kind of working together. And there's one thing I'd add to the group that you described. The role of the team leader, be it their people manager, or it might be the person, leading that 2-pizza team that you described, even though all of those folks don't report to her or him. And that leader has such an opportunity to create an inclusive environment in the way that they lead the work. One of the big things that we focus on at Capital One is a kind of cultural norm. We call it seeking the wisdom of the crowd. And it's really about just that, right? How do you ensure that you're getting perspectives from all of the folks around the table who presumably are bringing different expertise and different lenses to the problem? And so if you can take that diversity of perspective, you can put it together in a way that creates an entirely more powerful solution. But it takes skill, it takes talent in a leader to really invite folks into the conversation. And I think as one, as you have said, particularly folks who are maybe not as quick to jump in groups, what is the leader doing to create a safe space and actually facilitate getting those perspectives kind of into the room? There's so much power in those inclusive leadership skills, and we really see the power of that in the work that we do.
So I'm curious, what have your organizations done to add more flexibility for employees, really listen to the voice of the employees, and building culture from a distance? How about you, Whitney?
We made a very bold decision and announcement just week before last, actually, that Dropbox is going to go virtual first permanently. So while our offices are obviously closed for health reasons until July of 21 at the earliest, after that time, whenever it does become safe for some level of interaction, we're still not going to have desks or dedicated workspaces for employees. We're going to assume kind of heads down individual work is going to be done remotely. But we will have collaboration spaces that are set up classroom style, conversational style, whiteboard style, classroom, whatever, a variety of different setups where people can either on demand or kind of reserved go in and collaborate and ideate and create together. And I think that's a really interesting way to embrace a virtual first work culture and enable the kinds of interactions that work better when people are together. And so I'm very excited about that. And I think the interesting part about the kind of everybody's virtual first, it really does put everybody on an even playing field. There isn't really anymore a headquarters building where some of the people that happen to work in the headquarters building are at least perceived to have some advantages in working closely with the executive team or kind of where the decisions most often get made. And I think there's some real kind of democratization of decision making that will happen and of culture building. One of the things that I think the company's done really well from a flexibility standpoint is, in addition to this, we're being given a very generous stipend to do things like build out your home office, or when it's safe, rent a collaborative work desk in a co-working space, whatever kind of makes your work for you. We're also trying out something we call core collaboration hours that by region, so whether it's North America, Europe, or Asia, we're trying to get everybody to kind of concentrate their online availability and meeting times between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. in one of the time zones within that region. In North America, it happens to be the West Coast. That way we kind of bring people together more commonly, and then we focus on our individual work in common hours as well. And I think that will actually really help to drive a lot of collaboration and ideation, even in a fully remote environment, until we get to the point where we can leverage those collaboration spaces and studios that I mentioned.
And we don't really know what the future holds, but what you mentioned, Whitney, around the collaborative spaces is just so important, because probably even more so, we have to be intentional about how do we facilitate that kind of collaboration that employees need. And really, that's a fundamental building block for innovation and innovating for our customers. So I was just curious, Celia, what you're seeing for your organization. What are some things that you guys are looking at?
Janine, I'm so glad that you asked that question, because you're right. There's so many things we're learning as we go through this pandemic. And the two big things that we've really focused on, one is flexibility, and what are all the different ways in which we can offer flexibility, knowing that every associate is going through something slightly different. And so whether that is access to more mental health resources or access to more physical and tech supplies to have in your home, or other kinds of flexibility, flexibility in your workday and even how you're setting your hours and being able to take more kind of flex time off to handle parenting or other needs, really just trying to offer a variety of resources so that each person can customize to what really makes sense for them. And then the second thing I would touch on is being dynamic. One of the things that I've really been just most proud about our company and our individual team is that we've always had a practice of kind of coming together and sort of looking at what's changing in our environment and figuring out where we need to pivot. But we've really sped up the pace of that pivoting, whether it's about, our work approach and how we're going to work with our associates to get things done, or it's about what we're providing to our actual customers and where do we need to provide something different. And just the level of dynamism has been amazing. And that's one of the things that I hope stays with us as we think about what the new normal looks like. And I think we've built some really good practices there that'll serve us well.
That's great. And, it makes me think also about how we've, within our organization, we've set out to say, like, how can we not only encourage employees to make time, like blocking their calendars, like you mentioned, Whitney, or encouraging them to take advantage of resources that can support flex time, but can we do something intentional as well along those lines? So we've rolled out what we call sort of a no meetings day, where we've said, look, as a leadership team, we want to kind of walk the talk. And so we've kind of sent it out. It's on everybody's calendar that there's a day that we don't encourage people to do meetings. It's like blocked out on the calendar for that kind of reminder. Now, of course, there may be exceptions that people need to do certain meetings on those days, but we've seen just a large pickup in people really taking advantage of that. And sometimes we'll have in our different Slack channels people announcing on the no meetings day that, wow, how much they've gotten done, or it just kind of helps them reset and put that time back in their day where they're able to think and to able to kind of look at the bigger picture and also look more long-term and think ahead. So that wraps up, right? Thank you so much, Whitney and Celia, for joining me. This conversation, it's just been really riveting, right? And for me personally, it's an honor to discuss this important topic with both of you. If I just round up some of the takeaways that I captured from this conversation. One, we talked about innovation, and I think a key takeaway is diversity and inclusion are powerful drivers of innovation. A second area that I took away was the importance of data and being able to leverage that in driving decisions, understanding where we are, setting goals that are intentional on getting to new outcomes and improving on diversity and inclusion. And then the third one I really picked up strongly was around mentorship and sponsorship and everything in between, right? And how do we give the resources to employees and guidance on navigating their careers, but also putting in place like those one-to-one opportunities and taking it upon ourselves as leaders to create those spaces for employees to engage with us, and peers with each other. It's just a lot of different combinations, but that was a big topic that I took away from today's discussion. And then maybe there's a last one around just the new normal and just how we're all working and what is collaboration, what does work look like in the future, and how we're already iterating in our organizations so that we are as inclusive as possible as we adopt new ways of driving innovation for our customers. So thanks so much. I've really enjoyed the discussion, and I hope everyone has a great day.